Hi Chris, how are you?
Good evening, Rod. I was just checking it's evening because it's glorious sunshine here in the shed, as you can see streaming through the window.
I can see that. Our audio listeners can't, but if you check out our YouTube video on our YouTube channel, link in our website, then you can check out Chris's glorious sunshine too, and indeed the Welsh sunshine that's streaming through my rafters behind.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks pretty good with you, actually. So it's episode 119, and it's the 7th of May, or iPad Day, as it shall be known today.
Yeah, I was more keener on May the 4th, for May the 4th be with you for Star Wars Day. I think that works better than iPad Day as it hereafter may be known. But if we get two in a row, then you can call it iPad Day.
Yeah, maybe it will catch on, who knows, but it'd be unlike Apple to release iPad updates annually. So let's not pin our hopes on that.
Yeah, every 18 months or so, I think, is the more of the way, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say an odd cycle, but I'm not sure they've ever got into a sort of regular cadence with the iPad lineup at all. So anyway, I'm happy they've done something, so we can get into that in the main show. Should we dive into follow-up?
Let's do a bit of follow-up. So first item, and a couple of these just happened when we were recording last week, actually, so it's a shame we missed it. The first one is Apple have tweaked their core technology fee a little bit in that you don't need to pay the whole $1 million or whatever it was up front, I think. So they're sort of learning as they go a little bit. When they had that round table with Riley and others about app stores and things, this was something they were clearly trying to still work out. So you only pay out the core technology fee now after your first 1 million installs up to a cap of 1 million dollars per year. So yay, I guess.
I'd say yay-ish. It's good they're tweaking the rules. I wonder how much they're tweaking off their own bat and how much they're being forced to tweak. But I'm assuming you can monitor this, because if you are a developer doing a free app, you're going to want to keep an eye on that cost. So I don't know. I think yay.
Yay. I mean, the first thing is if you get no revenue whatsoever from a free app, so you're not monetizing it, then there is no core technology fee, and that is good. So Riley's specific situation where he released an app, didn't cost anything, you could just download it. If that had gone viral, he would have been up the spout basically for millions of euros. So Apple won't charge him for that either. Okay. So I think that is good. It depends as you say, what they class as monetization. I mean, if there's a little bit of advertising comes in from some other way, then I think Apple will be all over that like a rash. So I think this is a step in the right direction and closer to what the EU wanted in the first place. I think they've still got a bit to go, but this is an improvement.
Yeah, agreed. I think it is an improvement. And I'm curious to know if they're going to do any widening of the rules at WWDC for the rest of the world, or are they going to just keep to individual laws in individual continents, I guess, at this point, or countries?
Yeah, and the other thing that we missed really was the fact that all this is now going to apply to the iPad too. So,
yeah, which I think is fantastic, especially on iPad Day. We can celebrate that the iPad in the EU is getting the same privileges. Law abidingness, I don't know if that's a word, of the iPhone in Europe.
Yeah, and it was always weird that it was spun off to one side. I mean, it hadn't reached the threshold of, is it a gatekeeper app? I forget what the exact terminology that they say you must be to hit this threshold. But the iPad was almost there, so they just decided to lump it in. And in terms of sort of market penetration for tablets, there's no doubt Apple are the owners in that space. You very rarely see anything other than iPad. The odd Samsung thing, Google Pixel, yeah. I had a Google Pixel tablet at some point. They're no longer a thing. I think Samsung and maybe the odd Kindle are about it as far as other tablets go. And even Kindles, the color ones, you don't see that many of out in the world.
They're just for children, are they not? They seem to be the ultimate kiddie device because they're about £30-50, give or take, and therefore you can accept them getting a little bit bruised and battered by a toddler. No, I agree with you. I mean, most people think of of tablets, they think iPad, or they call tablets iPads. So this makes sense, and Apple have obviously already done 90% of the engineering required for this, so it's fantastic they're doing it for the iPad.
Yeah, rest of the world, please, Apple. Rest of the world.
Agreed.
Moving on, and this is something we just touched on briefly about 6 months ago, I think I want to say, about Apple Maps not containing cycling routes. There was the news that it was going to come to the Netherlands, because obviously they cycle more than anywhere else in the world, it would seem. They do like their cycling. Anyway, it's actually a live thing now. You can get cycling routes in the Netherlands, not before time.
No, that is good. It's good they've done it, isn't it? I do wonder how much Apple are going to continue to invest in Apple Maps if they're not going to do the car, because surely they were doing the maps because it'd be part of the car. So I'd like to think they're committed enough to the map platform. It's a great app. It's very popular. So I'm hoping they're going to carry on doing it. But I wonder whether their motivations for maintaining their own Apple Maps ecosystem is still as warranted as what it was a year ago, 3 years ago.
I can't see it going away. The CarPlay is still a thing, right? And they still want people to use the default mapping thing that comes with their phones. The default mapping thing that comes with their phones is Apple Maps. Lots of manufacturers depend on that. It's got features that Google Maps doesn't have. I know some people it's like Google Chrome, isn't it? That's the first thing they install on their computer. Maybe Google Maps is one of the first things they install on their devices. But I don't think so. I don't get the feeling from Apple that it's something they're going to run away from. Let's face it, they built the maps many, many years before they probably even dreamt about a car. They've invested a lot of money in it. It's quite a reasonable product at this point. I think the business side of it's not quite as good as Google's. I think relying on, is it Yelp as a third-party provider that they use to bring in businesses. If you want to know where your next pizza place is or your ATM is, they go out to it, whereas Google's is sort of in-house. It's all based on reviews that users are leaving there. I think that needs work from Apple's point of view. But other than that, it's a reasonably reliable map these days. It works 9 times out of 10.
I agree. I use it all the time, more or less exclusively.
You don't venture to Waze when you're in the car.
No, because in my car, if I use Apple Maps, I don't think Waze does this, or it certainly didn't when I tried a year ago. Apple Maps comes up in the cluster where the speedo is, whereas Waze didn't. I quite like that.
Well, I'd still rather on some trips like to know if there's a lurking policeman or an accident just up the road a little bit. Waze's reporting that kind of stuff is so much better than everybody else's.
I don't disagree with you. I think there's very little hazards reported in Apple Maps, which is disappointing. Apple just need to put that button right in the middle of the interface, whereas you have to go in a little menu to do it. I think Waze does it really well, by the way.
Yeah, it's like 3 layers deep if you want to report something, so nobody does. Whereas Waze, it's just there, and you can ask a passenger to do it more safely than you can, to tap that button and report the thing, and it works really well in Waze.
Agreed.
Moving on, there's been a lot of fuss about AI-powered gadgets. We're going to be talking about AI a little bit as well later on in the show. The Humane AI pen was absolutely destroyed when it came to review. The Rabbit R1, which we talked about in this show, which is a much cheaper AI-powered gadget, I think it's $200 when it came out, has also now been absolutely destroyed when it's come to interview, suffering many of the problems that the Humane AI pen did. It's slow, the battery's poor, the functionality of it's not great. Even worse than the Humane AI pen is it has a screen, but it's only a touch screen when you bring the keyboard up. You've got to use the weird slow touch jog wheel sort of move around the interface and all the rest of it. So that's a problem. I think people are a bit kinder about it because it's just $200 and not $700, and you can plug in your own SIM card. But people have managed to pull the Rabbit app off it, and they've discovered that underneath it, it's running Android. I bet the Humane AI pen as well, actually, which isn't a surprise to anyone. But what did you think about this?
So I quite like the look of the Rabbit R1 as a fun little toy, as it were. I guess it is frustrating it's just an app, but I guess people wouldn't pay for just an app, and therefore they've made the hardware to monetize it maybe, but it's not a lot of money, is it, that's going to fund your development and running your cloud services. So I'm not surprised, a bit disappointed. And I was thinking about all these different devices that we've got coming out in different sort of categories at the moment. And it kind of reminds me of the pre-iPhone, smartphone era, when you'd have different phones all the time, or you'd have different Palm Pilots, as we've been talking around, or you'd have different consoles. Like there used to be, I think it was like TapBots or TapOS or something like that. I can't remember what it was. But you had lots of different types of hardware, and we seem to be having a resurgence of that 15, 16, 20 years later. And I don't know. It's nice people are trying things, but I think it's very hard to make something that's sticky.
My impression of this is there's a very, very small gap in the market before Apple and Google come along and take over the space again by just making it an app on your smartphone. And they didn't want to link these to smartphones because this was their chance to actually get a toe in the door. Is that the right? Finger in the door? Whatever it is you put in the door. So they did put them out in their own hardware. They tried to do something different. But any minute now, I think it's 8 days for Google I/O and a month for WWDC, the big boys are going to come along and they're going to absolutely embed this stuff everywhere. So the fact that these are not good enough hardware, very buggy software, implementation is, we when you read people or watch people trying to order pizzas or Ubers or all the rest of it using the inbuilt web scraping for these things, the security model is very dodgy as well. Rabbit, it seems, didn't set up any integrations with third party, and it's all run on a virtual machine somewhere in a Linux box in somebody's cupboard. So, you're putting your password into potentially insecure, third party thing, which is then going somewhere else, and it may or may not work. All the ordering people were doing for DoorDash, that Quinn Nelson did a video on YouTube using the Rabbit R1, was dreadful. So why would you want to pay more money for a suboptimal experience that, frankly, if you wait a couple of days and you're a Google person, the chances are you're going to have something a lot richer very soon.
Yeah, so I agree with you on this. I do wonder whether something like the Rabbit R1, though, if they got it right, would they have had an opportunity there to be gobbled up by one of the bigger companies maybe and have it folded in? But obviously that was not the case, I think, and probably won't be the case. You'd like to think Google will be able to do it better, I guess.
I think it's a shame. Had these been wonderfully executed, speedy, snappy, good battery life, bit different, they could have really done something quite unique here. And we continually talk on this show that we want to see challengers for Google and Apple. And something like this could have been, which is why we did a main show about it a few weeks ago, but could this be the next thing? And no is the answer. But it would have been nice if they'd actually sort of pushed them a little bit, and we could have seen potentially something a little bit different, coming. But there we are.
Yeah, agreed. It is. It's a sad day for challenger companies, I guess. But hey ho, let's hope they carry on, and maybe some software updates, and they will persist. But I don't know. I'm skeptical.
Yeah, I am too. The other side of this is the companies that are doing really well out of this are OpenAI and Microsoft and Google themselves, because they've got their own open LLM models to run these things on. So I think on the software side, this is fine. I do still have deep concerns about the amount of compute needed to run these large language models. They're not hugely instant, though that will be improved by throwing more hardware at them. But it's computationally expensive. It costs lots of power to run these things. You need GPUs. To run them at scale is a problem. So I am more interested in Apple's on-device type things that we've had a couple of rumours of up till now. But I am worried about how useful they are. And do the public really care? I mean, it's a bit of a novelty to be able to summarize your email or summarize the article that you're reading. But there isn't really still that killer app. It's making some students' lives easier. It's making some lecturers' lives harder. But it is quite interesting, I think. What's the end game of this?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I haven't seen the killer thing, and I know this is a conversation where I work of AI. A lot of it sounds good. It's moving quite fast. But what is the thing? What's the killer thing? Like Google nailed the killer search thing for the web. It took a while for them to gobble up their competitors, but they did it. And I don't think we've seen it yet for AI. I think there's some really good stuff for niche areas. But again, it's not sticky enough yet, and it's not reliable enough. But it's only a matter of time, I think, before that changes.
It is. Should we move on and do some news?
Let's do the news. So we just got a brief roundup, I think, of a few stories, because we've got a bit more of a meteor show as there's been an Apple event today.
Chris is just desperate to get to the iPads. That's all this whole show is. It's a sprint, not a jog towards the iPad section.
I like my iPads, all right. Somebody's got to in this country. I'm probably the only one.
I'm going to talk about something we'd normally spend a whole show on, and that would be Apple's quarter 2 results. So it has a services record this quarter, Apple. They made $90.8 billion, or there was $90.8 billion of revenue. The only sort of highlight, however, in the whole thing, everything was down. Phones were down. iPads were down. Maybe they've just fixed that. Everything was down except services. Quite a lot of the services is down to Google's 20. What did we decide it was? 20 billion? I think it was 20 billion with a P, wasn't it?
Yeah, give or take, I think. And it is insane that Google are propping up Apple's services revenue.
Yeah. So, all right, we think that's over the course of a year, so 20 billion spread over 4 quarters, fine. But there's 23.9 billion in this quarter, so even so, a decent chunk of that is Google's money.
Yeah, and to be fair to Apple, I mean, if you look at their pie chart on the 6 colours article we've linked to, nearly half is the iPhone, we're just over, and a quarter is services. It's impressive now that they have moved away from the Mac, the iPad and wearables, and basically they've got the phone and services, and then a couple of little hobby projects that they're doing. And I'm assuming in wearables we've got Vision, because that's obviously new. I assume that comes under wearables and not under iPad, because it is an iPad in essence.
Yeah, I don't think we should talk about vision. It's a blip at the moment. Until we do something more with vision, it's fine. It's certainly not
Agreed.
making any decent sort of impact on these numbers. So basically, Mac revenue down 4%, even though we've got an M3 release for the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. iPad revenue crashed down to 5.6 billion, a 17% drop. Not a surprise given the space between iPads. And iPhone revenue was 46 billion, down 10% versus the quarter before. So to me, the phones dropping aren't a surprise for lots of reasons we've talked about. People are hanging on to phones longer. Phones are getting passed on to family members. They're facing a lot more competition from things like foldables. All phones are down anyway because everybody's doing this kind of stuff of making the devices last longer. It's maybe not a surprise that it's going down, and we're at that sort of gap when they're building up to the next release of the iPhone 16, aren't they? So, it's down a bit. Still the bulk of the profits, as you say, and yeah, wearables is the shiny thing within that.
Yeah, that's it really, isn't it? I think there's not a huge amount to say, I think, on their revenue. And I don't think anybody's overly surprised that Mac and iPad aren't doing fantastic in a quarter where not a huge... I know their Macs had a little bit more love, but not a huge amount. And I think where they've made such good devices, and we're going to talk about this a bit later, there's actually minimal changes they're making. It doesn't feel like it's... Maybe I'm remembering things with rose-tinted glasses. Like 20 years ago, there'd be a new laptop out and there'd be improvements of port speed, processor, more RAM, faster hard drives. Whereas actually a lot of those things have reached a point now where they're not worthy of an upgrade. It's largely the chip at the moment seems to be the thing that's driving people to upgrade.
They could put a bit more RAM in it.
I don't disagree they should put some more RAM in it, but the speed of the RAM isn't improving, and it's not like it was 20 years ago where all the components were being changed model over model. And so I think when people are upgrading, they probably are holding on to devices a little longer than what they would have done, even enthusiasts like ourselves.
Slight diversion. I tried to set up an old Mac Mini in place to have sort of an in-place computer rather than plugging my laptop in and out. It's a 2018 i7, 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte Mac Mini, so quite stacked. It's a decent spec. It's dreadful. It's slow. It's buggy. It's problematic. The fans spin up as soon as you look at it. It sits idling at a temperature of 56 degrees. So that is not a power efficient machine. It's a big honking chip. It's running really hot. This fan's spinning all the time. It wasn't a great experience. I unplugged it. I've gone back to my laptop because most of the time, except when I'm encoding video, it's whisper silent. It's a 5-year-old computer. It's a 2018 Mac Mini. So the next generation of this computer was the M1. If you had an M1 Mac Mini now, I don't know why you'd change it for an M3 or even an M4 if that comes along in 5 minutes' time, because it's such a good computer. It is so performant as long as you get enough RAM in it. That's a good thing. So I'm with you. I think the drive to change computers, Apple are going to have a real problem, and you kind of see this in these numbers. Just sticking a 3 or a 4 or a 5 on the end of the M isn't enough. When what they've got is a really good computer. A really good computer that's going to do them, if they bought enough RAM and enough SSD space in it, to do for a couple of years. And for most people, not people who are geeky and mess around with them, it is good enough.
No, I completely agree with you. I think it's a tougher sell for upgrades. My wife, for example, she's got an M1 MacBook Air. Sorry, I can't remember exactly what model she had. It's fantastic for her. It's perfect. And here we are. We've got the M3 out now. It's 3 years old. I'm not even looking at changing it right now because it's a fantastic device, and it is a problem Apple are going to have to deal with at some point in time.
Yep, definitely. So we'd usually spend the whole show talking about this and going through the charts and numbers, but we will instead move on, other than to say it looks like there's a bit of a story around slumping iPhone sales, particularly in China. And this is, depending on who you ask, either definitely a thing or about where it was anyway. We did report on Chinese authorities saying, no, you must use Chinese devices to work within the Chinese government and civil service and things like that. And that's, if you look at China doing that, America do that too. They don't want people with Huawei phones or anything. They want American-built devices. We see the same in UK networks. They're pulling out Huawei 5G network points and putting in by other manufacturers. So I don't think it's down to the phones not being good enough. I think it's more down to, corporate and civil policy more than anything else. So I guess it is what it is.
I completely agree with you. It does. That definitely seems to be the way the world is going now, that governments are very much pushing for people to buy local devices to their country, I guess.
Friendly states.
Friendly states, yes. That might be a better way of phrasing it.
Yeah. Anyway, Enough on revenue. They still make all the money in the world.
Do you know what, though? I think if we had put this in the main show, I think we would struggle to talk for a main show's distance on it, because I don't think there's a huge amount to say. Because there hasn't been lots of releases, and we've talked about this all year. It's been a very quiet year, really, product-wise.
Yeah, I guess so. So our next story is from The Verge. More details are emerging about Apple's plans for AI in iOS 18. So this is things like Siri's ability to summarize text messages and things like that. So things that happen on the phone, your notes, web pages you're looking at, device-intensive things that don't need to get pushed off to the cloud, that potentially Siri, I wonder if they'll still call it Siri, will be able to do something about. I gotta say, I don't need a LLM to summarize a text message for me, but maybe there are other things that it would be useful for.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I wonder whether they're going to call it Siri, because it feels like the name's got baggage. And mine's just cut in, apologies. So I agree with you on that. Like I say, it does feel like they could take the opportunity to rebrand. B, summarizing stuff seems to be the hotness. The Microsoft Copilot engine does a lot of this. I haven't really used it that much. I don't find it that sticky for me. But it just seems to be the low-hanging fruit, I guess. It's something that's probably quite easy to do. You feed it some text, it summarizes it. And therefore they can tick a box that, yep, we do that too. So I wonder whether they've probably got some of that. We're just doing what everybody else is doing. But hopefully we're doing more than what everybody else is doing in these other areas. That's what I think we're all looking for.
This is what we're all looking for. We want it to go, next time I leave the house, remind me to pick up my keys, and when I'm 5 minutes from leaving work next time, remember I've got to pick up milk before I come back or something like that. And it just, boom, it sticks all that into your reminders. Okay, I've done that. You want all that to happen just conversationally, just readily, and not go, I will remind you to buy oil, or whatever it thinks you've heard at that point. You want to have a conversation about, did you say oil? Did you say flowers? Stuff like that. That's where it should be more clever. I don't need it to summarize a text message. I want to read a long-form web page. I think long-form writers must be disgusted about the fact that they spend hours crafting excellent articles, careful wordage and all the rest of it, and it gets summarized to 5 bullet points by a Copilot or something like that. So I'm happy to take the time to read stuff like that. Of course, occasionally you're in a rush, but it's just an application of these LLMs that are easy to demonstrate. It's a good demo, but you're right. You want more for it, particularly on device. Show me all the photographs where I'm with this person over the last 4 years where I'm wearing a pink shirt. That's what I want.
Yeah, can you do the stuff for me that I struggle to do? I think the summarization feature can be good, in my view. Like if you've got a long email thread and you've been CC'd in, quite late on in the process, that's when it can be good. But like I say, for a text message, probably less exciting.
It's good that they're in the game, though, I suppose. And again, running on the phone has plenty of capacity, as does the iPad, to run these things. They've been talking about neural engines since the M1, so let's see them do something.
Yeah, agreed. Let's see them do something. That's what we want. Let's see it. So I think it's going to be really exciting. They've made a lot of noise, so they're digging themselves into a hole if they can't deliver on it. It'll be their own fault because they're building the excitement.
Definitely. Moving on, and this is more in your neck of the world than mine, but we trumpeted the arrival of passkeys and additional security options for our logins and Google and Apple and all the rest of it, and you must be delighted to know that it's now coming to Word, Excel, and other consumer Microsoft things.
That's only for consumer Microsoft accounts, and Microsoft often do this. They do it for their consumer-based stuff before they bring it to the corporate stuff. It was the same with the Copilot app. You could log in with a consumer Microsoft account, but not a corporate or an educational one. So hopefully this will come further down the pipe, as it were. I must confess, what we've done actually is we've gone passwordless with it, and we're piloting it so that you go and log into something, say on a computer or on your device, and your phone just pops up. Do you approve this? Enter this. Type the number that's on the screen of the device trying to log into. It's really neat. But this is great. Passkeys seem to be there. I've not really done a lot with passkeys, and it's an area where I think I've just let everybody crack on with it for a year or so, and then I should start using it, like with Amazon, for example. I know they support it.
Yeah, so I've got it on my Google account. I've got it on my work Outlook account. It annoys me, actually, the whole log into my Outlook on my phone to see the number. You can't often see the number, and one of the options it gives you is I can't see it, and it goes and drops out of the way for a little bit and pops back up again. So you can enter your 35 or whatever your code is. I'd much rather use the two-factor authenticator that I've got built into 1Password. So I'm quite often going, I don't have this device right now, and at least you can override it and do the thing you do want to do. When I was on the Pixel phone, I'm back on an iPhone because I've done my month. Hooray, go me. I didn't change over to be the primary Outlook device, so I was always having to use the 1Password thing. So I'm glad you've got that still secure fallback position for these things.
Yeah, they need to have that, don't they? 'Cause otherwise it could be bad.
Could be very bad. Anything else to say about that?
No, I don't think so. It's good. More passkeys, please, and then hopefully they become sticky. Whereas I think at the moment they're more a bit on the fringe of security, aren't they?
They are a little bit. Moving on, we like a good Tesla story. As a Tesla driver, I'm always interested in this kind of thing. By far, the best reason to have a Tesla is the supercharger network. It often makes me think, when I'm thinking of replacing the car, which I'm thinking of doing right now, it's the thing that keeps pulling me back to consider them, because the reliability and knowing that they're always there and that they're somewhere useful and they're fast. They're properly fast. I've seen them up to 230 kilowatt hours. Absolutely blasting charging in the car. When I'm trying to get up to Scotland, this is what I want. Elon took a bit of a notion because of the falling share prices we talked about in a couple of shows ago. He's fired teams every week for the last 4 weeks. Last week he fired the entire supercharger team. Awful.
Sorry, I was just sighing for our listeners and our watchers. This just seems bonkers to me. What an environment to live in. That there's a team being fired every week. There's no, it must be very unsettling. It was that team last week. We're safe this week, but next week it could well be you. And then how have they got rid of the whole division? Like, they're still rolling them out, and there's a quote in here saying they're just going to roll out slower pace at new locations, which isn't very Elon-esque, being slower. I don't know, it just seems bizarre you get rid of a whole division rather than get rid of 90% of the division if you're going to run it on a skeleton crew. So, big concern here, surely.
I think this is a problem for EVs as a whole, where they're slumping globally, that people are a bit concerned about. They're particularly the second-hand value. Apparently Chinese cars are building up at UK and European ports. There's a backlog, all manufacturers are dropping prices. Tesla have had amazing revenues in their vehicles. I think that we're getting sort of 7 or 8%, where normally a manufacturer's on 4 or 5. So they had that, and then it's just cratered for them. A lot of that, I got to say, is down to Elon himself. His attitude and his approach to Twitter and how his persona comes over. We've said it on this show, he sort of was a flag waver for electric vehicles, that he was seen to be this otherworldly genius who brought along amazing cars, and people bought into it, and the cars were good enough. The supercharger network is the thing that really sold it, though. In America, in the UK, in Europe, in a Tesla, you knew you could get in your car, it would go charge, charge, charge. This one's free, go to it, boom. Charge for 15 minutes here, 14 minutes there, and everything just worked. Taking away this is another sort of absolute hammer blow to Tesla, I think. I mean, the existing superchargers aren't going anywhere. But if you take out the division, does that include the people that service them and keep the most reliable thing up and running and upgrade the old slow ones to the new fast ones and? And this lets A, other manufacturers steal a march on them, but B, those Chinese manufacturers are probably going, we could buy that Tesla company, couldn't we? They're really in trouble. And you get an instant made wonderful advantage in the electric vehicle market. Anybody that could pick these up for a song, they're absolutely a massive advantage. And let's face it, the Chinese manufacturers, BYD, Build Your Dreams, are now the biggest manufacturer of electric vehicles in the world.
Is that right?
Yeah.
They got some quite cool designs. They got some strange names, but some quite cool designs. There's one called the Funky Cat. I've seen it in this country. You're right. They could. If Elon carries on doing what he's doing and they end up suppressing the share price, they could end up getting swallowed whole by a company like this, who actually manage it properly. Maybe that's what they're going for. Maybe they are trying to make it look skinny on paper so that somebody does come and purchase them. I don't know. It seems a very bizarre way of doing business.
But we've said that about him before. Anyway, I find it slightly disturbing, but at the same time, it hopefully gives a bit of space in the market for others to grow. And I have no problems with buying a second-hand electric vehicle. I think the batteries in them are conservatively managed enough that you're still going to have 93-94% charge in a 3-year-old vehicle and get yourself a bit of a bargain. I would go about a Tesla these days, though.
Yeah, I'm quite happy I didn't go for a Tesla at the moment. If I'm being honest, I'm sorry you're not in that position, but my BMW is not perfect. It has suffered from the drop in value. If it was my car, I'd be a bit upset of how much it's dropped in a very short period of time.
I watched an American chap who spent $60,000 on a Polestar 2. He's run it for 3 years, and it's now worth $18,000, which is, he's still paying for a $60,000 loan to buy the car. And he loves the car, but he can't believe the depreciation on it.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Absolutely brutal. Moving on, and sticking with cars briefly, Mercedes-Benz has said they won't let Apple take over its screens. They're quite happy to have it on their central screen, but they're not letting it take over all the gauges and clusters and things like that in the way that Aston Martin and Porsche are happy to. What did you think of this as a German car driver?
Yeah, so I actually listened to this podcast. It was the podcast that Nilay Patel does. And I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank as to what the podcast is called as he whips his phone out to have a quick look.
It's not Decoder, is it?
Yes, I think it is Decoder. Thank you. So I listened to it on there, and actually, to be fair, it's Decoder with Nilay Patel, and it's ultimately from the Verge group, I guess. But the Mercedes CEO I actually really enjoyed listening to him. I'm not a big Mercedes fan, but actually I was quite impressed with their CEO. Very interesting. They spoke quite a bit about the G-Wagon. And he said, no, why would we do that? We're investing heavily in entertainment. We want it to be a good experience. But you can see it, I guess, for Mercedes. They've got this thing called the hyper screen. And it's literally like your whole dash is screen, like some crazy big screen in front of you. And it's a funny shape. So it looks like a big T, I guess, because you've got an iPad bit in the middle. You've got the whole strip, where the air vents are. So I can kind of see it from their perspective. It'll be interesting to see what they do, but it's not good for Apple. And my one downer on, I guess, current CarPlay that we use on our phones is they haven't really updated it very much. It doesn't seem to be changing or getting much new functionality. I'm hoping something's coming later this year, but it's moving quite slowly, and you see it on so many cars, but yeah, it doesn't seem to get a huge amount of love, sadly, which is a shame, because surely there is a team working on it, or maybe they've all been working on this next gen one, which most people won't get to use because the cars only support the first gen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a strange position to be in. I'm sure Apple thought that their own car would come along and everybody would rush out and buy that, or they'd be able to sell expanded CarPlay to more manufacturers than they have. But I think the experience of what they've done with the App Store and what they've done with the Music Store and what they've done with TV and movies has made companies very nervy about Apple moving into a space, taking over, and then them having complete control over your vehicle's dashboard. We see it with GM. I think GM have gone a step too far with this. That they've said no Apple stuff at all, as have Rivian and Tesla and others. But most consumers expect an Android Auto or a CarPlay on it to be able to have their music and things as they manage it. But I do understand the manufacturers pushing back on this expansion to it. And cynically, does it need more than it gives you? You can run your maps on it. It's more reliable than the manufacturer's one. You can listen to your music. You can respond to your messages by text. Do you really need much more than that?
True. I just like to see a bit more love with it. I like to be able to, when I'm playing an album, for example, I'd like to click on the artist and get their albums, because I can get to the albums I haven't got in my library through the home screen, but I can't get to it from listening to an artist I'm interested in. And there's just some functionality like that, or maybe just a little brush of paint, maybe just change the colours a little bit and liven it up. When I'm on the dashboard icon down the bottom right, it always shows it as if I've got a left-hand drive car. Why can't I have it localised for the UK, please?
You can go into options and you can change that.
Not the icon. The icon's wrong.
You can move whether it's right-hand drive or left-hand drive.
But just little things like that.
I'd like to see. No. But you have a valid point. You could say something like you triggered with a few thoughts as you were talking there. When the car is not in motion, completely stationary, why can't I stream my Apple TV Plus to it or fiddle with X, Y, or Z a little more closely than I do now?
I completely agree with you there. I'm a big watcher of content in my car, but why not? Why not give me some more stuff? Other car manufacturers are doing it. Why can't I do it? So I think they are behind, and they must have a team that's working on this.
I mean, it is interesting. I've been looking at the Volvo EX30 as one of the potential things I'm considering. Little Volvo four-wheel drive that's actually 50% Geely, which is another Chinese company who are a massive manufacturer. And the center screen in that is very Tesla-like in the sense that the speedo's on it and the heat and ventilation and air conditioning and things are on it as well. But built into that is Android Automotive. So you get Google Maps out of the box, you get very good voice assistant, you get Spotify built into it and YouTube Music and all that kind of stuff. So you do get quite a comprehensive package there. Again, Apple probably needs to be a little bit careful not to rest on their laurels with CarPlay too much. Otherwise, people will just stick to the built-in thing. Unfortunately, the built-in thing is going to be Google. Anyway, it's a thought.
Yeah, BMW, by the way, are doing the same. They've gone to Google for the new, not my version, but for the newer ones, they've gone to Google underneath.
Yeah, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I don't disagree.
There we go. Anything else in news?
Nah, let's get into media.
So media, very rapid-fire trip through media. The first thing was just an interesting article I found on 9to5Mac by Ryan Christoffel, talking about is Apple TV Plus having a quality crisis. So when it came out the gate, we had some amazing content. I mean, thinking about it, there was what was it? CarPlay Karaoke, and then there was Battle of the Apps or something, I think were the first two shows that Apple TV Plus launched with. But very quickly then we got Ted Lasso, we got Severance, we got For All Mankind, we got Foundation. We've had some fantastic stuff to watch on Apple TV Plus.
We had the morning show.
Morning Show, Slow Horses, Pachinko, We Crashed, you enjoyed, there's been some great shows on Apple TV Plus. However...
Oh, We Crashed. Now, actually, do you know what? I love that. That was a fantastic TV show. Sorry for a tangent.
Didn't watch it. But latterly, and I'm looking at the list of things that have come out recently, Criminal Record, watched it, was dreadful. Masters of the Air, tried to watch it, gave up 3 episodes, was dreadful. Constellation, lasted an episode and a half, was dreadful. The Completely Made Up Adventures of Dick Turpin. My daughter tried to watch it. I had no interest whatsoever. She said it was dreadful.
Dreadful. I concur with that statement. And myself and your daughter are in very different age demographics, and neither of us liked it.
Yeah. Pam Royal, I haven't watched. I've got no interest. Looks terrible.
I haven't seen it either. I'm trying to think what I do want to watch this on Apple TV Plus right now. And I don't. Oh, the only thing I've got that's come up for me is we need some interlude music at this point. It is the show with, is it Chris O'Dowd?
I don't know what that is.
It's called Big Door Prize. I actually quite enjoyed season 1 of that, and season 2 is out now. I did watch Argyle on it recently, but it was a fun film, but it's not a film I'm ever going to watch again, sadly.
Yeah. I got through most of the first season of The Big Door Prize, but lost interest in it after about episode 6, I think.
I don't know why. I quite enjoyed it, and I can't really explain why I enjoyed it.
And the only one that looked reasonably interesting to me was Sugar, which is the Colin
Farrell.
Colin Farrell's detective thing, but it's got extremely bad ratings as well, apparently, so I might not bother. So, suffice it to say, we don't need to go on at length about it, but it does seem, from their HBO start of having all the best stuff, then there's definitely been a drop in quality as a means of getting more quantity on there. But every TV network and streaming service has duffers as well as the sort of cash cows, so hopefully this is just a blip.
Yeah, look, they're never going to please everybody. I've got Disney Plus, I've got Prime, I bought them for reasons, but I don't watch everything on it, and it's the same with Apple TV. But I would have probably dropped off Apple TV a bit sooner, I think. I only have it largely because it's free.
And it has just occurred to me while we're talking, the other thing we've got in here is COVID. So, some of these shows would have been made during COVID. They would have been able to get together. Scriptwriters would have not been able to, metaphorically bounce balls off and ideas off each other as they were doing it, except on Zoom. So maybe a little bit of this is just post-COVID programming, and we're going to bounce back with some amazing stuff. But
something's got to happen because the sheer quantum of movies aren't being made, are they? You look at the cinema listings. There's not a lot on. So everybody's making TV shows, and it feels like we're all doing TV shows. We're not doing many movies, and it feels like the scales need to readjust a little bit.
I'm okay with it. People don't go to the cinema.
I want to go to the cinema.
June 2 was really good in the cinema. Did you go on that?
No, I still haven't watched it.
Moving on. Race Across the World. Still back, still good. Still loving every episode.
If somebody's listened to this show and they've not watched any form of Race Across the World, stop what you're doing. Go and watch it right now. It's fantastic. Such a good, family, easy-to-watch TV show. Brilliant premise. Racing across countries in buses has never been so exciting. Yeah,
really well edited. Looks great. Well narrated. Beautiful, beautiful places that makes you want to go and visit them. It's a terrific show.
100%. It's like a modern day Judith Chalmers for the I Wish You Were Here, I think it was called, a TV show back in the 90s, 80s, 90s. And it's kind of that. It makes you want to go and explore different countries. And I think it does a really good job of doing it, but not in a traditional travel style show. I think it's fantastic. I love it.
I think you just dated yourself as older than me, Chris.
I'm not older than you for the record, but I have definitely dated myself.
Moving on, one I didn't mention, it's probably a bit too sad or childish for many, but I was a big fan of the Clone Wars. It's an animated cartoon on Disney Plus of what happened to the clones sort of during and after the films to a certain degree. They released a 3-season show called The Bad Batch, which were defective clones left over from the Clone Wars, and it sort of charts the, if you're interested in your Star Wars, rise of stormtroopers as the clones went away and what happened to them, and just a few stories around that. It's really good. It's really interesting. It's written by Dave Filoni, who did the Clone Wars cartoon and The Mandalorian. But it's finished now, 3 seasons of it. It's really good. If you're trying to get into a little bit of animated Star Wars stuff, it's a really good place to start.
Yeah, I've never done the animated stuff, but I've heard good things about the Bad Batch, and I think it's something I should try.
Yeah, it was good.
I'll move on to Clarkson's Farm. So on Friday, Clarkson's Farm dropped on Amazon Prime, which I've been watching with my children. And you know what? It's really good. It just carried on in the same vein. Fantastic. And it did make me resubscribe to Amazon Prime because I did let my subscription lapse a little bit. I thought, I'll see how long we can go without Amazon Prime. And it turns out just over a week is the number because Clarkson's Farm came out and the family wanted to watch it.
I've still only watched the first episode of Clarkson's Farm. I quite enjoyed it, though, I gotta say. It's more interesting for the farming than Jeremy Clarkson. And I read an interview with him in The Guardian. I'm cautious. We're going to go long if we're not careful. About how actually being a farmer had changed his opinions on the environment and things. And you see that in the latest Grand Tour. He's going around picking up plastic bottles and things now. So his whole attitude towards cars are great and who cares if they pollute, it's all made up, has definitely gone since he became a farmer. And that's quite refreshing.
Yeah, he's changed quite a bit. My children love it. I do wonder how they found the characters they ended up with in Clarkson's Farm, because how often would you get a contracting farmer in Caleb that's actually quite funny, quite sweary, but just plays the part really well. It's the same with the guy who does the dry stone walling that you can't understand, and his business advisor Charlie. They've got some great characters in there, and I wonder, did they make them become those characters, or were they just like that? And it all kind of just works, and they've got quite a good ensemble. But interestingly, I met with some friends over the weekend, and it was 3 or 4 different families, and they'd all watched the first 2 episodes of Clarkson's Farm and thoroughly enjoyed it.
There you go. I enjoyed the first one. I'll watch the second one. Moving on, another Amazon Prime show, Fallout. I finished that. I think I recommended it a couple of weeks back. It's great. Even if you don't like the computer game, if you get nothing better to watch on Amazon, give it a shot. I thoroughly enjoyed Fallout.
Well, now I've renewed my membership, I will pop that on the list. And in a similar vein, my Disney Plus had expired, and I went a lot longer without Disney Plus, probably about 2 months, and then I've renewed it because of Welcome to Wrexham Series 3. It's just landed, and they put it out on the same day as Clarkson's Farm, obviously is their, I guess, competitor to it. And I love that show. I'm not a big football person, but the show is fantastic, so would definitely recommend.
Never watched it. I like Rob McElhenney and I like Ryan Reynolds.
They both come across, in my opinion, really well in it. They actually genuinely seem like good people, and I just think the show's brilliant. So, gets my vote.
Games. I tried Delta.
There
We go. That was the story. It's very well done. Found some ROMs that I happened to have lying around. They fell off the back of a truck. Let's not go into that in too much detail. Delta's a really good emulator of Nintendo games, I've got to say. It is performance. It saves your state in between things. The quality of it is undeniable. I don't like games with virtual controllers, though. I don't feel they work very well. I'm not accurate at all.
I don't disagree with that statement. It's the best they can do with what they've got. There's no physical buttons. It's a fantastic emulator. It's done really well. The controllers look amazing, like the quality of the graphics, and then obviously you've got the game running in half the screen space kind of thing. I think it's a fantastic app. Would definitely recommend, and it's coming to iPad, which I think we reported last week.
Yep, can't wait. And pair it with a PlayStation or an Xbox controller if you can, because it's going to be better. Moving swiftly along, and this is slightly surprising news to me, actually. So Microsoft and our continuing series of stories about the Competition and Mergers Authority in the UK, what they were going to do with the studios that had Call of Duty and all the rest of them, Bethesda, who make Fallout, the game, have suddenly announced today that they're shutting down Bethesda, Redfall, and others, and sort of merging them all together. So Arcane, another of the studios they're shutting down, made Deathloop, which I played and thoroughly enjoyed, and the Dishonored series. Their last one was a stinker. But these are big name studios that Microsoft are shuttering following their sort of merger. And I just find it quite surprising that taking these names that are really, particularly Bethesda, is a huge software house, made some really classic games, and they're just shuttering them all. So this game is a bit of a surprise to me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and it feels a bit EA-esque. So EA, back in the 90s, 2000s, bought loads of companies and ended up mothballing most of them for cost savings. And it's really interesting. You look at how many games EA release a year now. It's actually not that many for the amount of property in it that they own over the years and things they could reboot or use the characters from or the story or the worlds. They do very little with it, and it's upsetting. They release obviously the FIFAs and the Formula One game, their annual titles, but it's super disappointing, and it does feel like Microsoft sadly have gone in a similar way.
Yeah, worrying, I think. The market has moved between small indies like the people who make Slay the Spire and other little games like that get big, and the big giants like Call of Duty, or it's not called EA Sport. What's the football thing called these days? It's EA Football or something.
You're thinking of FIFA, but it's FC 24.
Yeah. So you've got the big tentpole things that come out every year that they just give it a fresh coat of paint and put it out the door again. That doesn't take them a huge amount of work really. And then the small indies, and the small indies are beginning to eat their lunch in the sense that they really grab people's hearts and minds, and they want to play them. And then you've got Nintendo, who are out on their own with the Switch and things, and we've got a story on them in a minute as well. But I really feel there's a big division between those big AAA publishers who can't sustain all these publishing houses, or don't really want to sustain. Maybe the market isn't there, but gaming is hugely profitable. That's why Microsoft bought them and worked so hard to get them in the first place.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what was their business justification for buying them. But I think you're right. You've got the big boys turfing out the games each year or doing sequels to existing properties, and then you've got the much smaller businesses doing the real niche games that, like you say, have a cult following and do pretty well. And you see quite a lot of that on Steam. And then you've got the people in the middle that are just either getting snapped up and squeezed or just can't balance the books because maybe they've got too many staff and they're not selling enough of the game. Whereas it's either the really big boys or the really small boys and girls, and just not that room for the bit in the middle.
Yeah. Worrying times for the gaming industry. And a story on Nintendo Direct.
Let's end games on a high. Apparently there's a Nintendo Direct coming in June to announce new properties coming out on the current Nintendo Switch, but there will be an announcement this fiscal year for the Switch replacement. So it feels like Nintendo is seriously milking the Switch till the bitter end, which I'm quite happy about. I love that console. But they did say in one of the articles I was reading that they first announced the Switch in 2015. Whoa, 9 years. That's pretty impressive for hardware, and it's still got some cracking games on it. So super excited to see what they're going to come out with later this year.
Yeah, low power hardware isn't a problem. The Switch, the Steam Deck isn't the most, setting the world on fire device either. It's good. It's got good battery life and all the rest of it. I think the Switch is fine. They probably do need another one. I would sound a note of caution about follow-ups to Nintendo's consoles, though, because Wii was great. Wii U wasn't. They're not always all that good at following up the massive hit. The GameCube wasn't great, but whatever came before it, the SNES was obviously massive. The N64, rather, was massive.
The N64, dude?
Yeah, the N64 was massive. So, notes of caution around that.
I completely agree. I'm quite excited they're bringing a few more games out on the current Switch. Fair play to them. They're still pumping effort into the existing hardware, which is good.
Or milking their cash cow. So, main show?
Well, they've got to milk the cash cow so they can afford to have a lean period if the next one's a dud.
Could well be. Main show?
Yes, main show. Let's talk about iPad event today.
Well, I was planning on just letting you tell everybody about iPad event, and I'm just going to sit back and listen for a bit. So take it away, Chris, for the main show on iPads.
Well, actually, so I'm just loading up my notes on my Kindle Scribe that I'm still very much using, that we've talked about in the show. But I think this could be quite good with you and me going through it, because we both came to the event in different places, and we're probably leaving the event in different places, both financially and mentally. In that, obviously, I'm a big iPad user. I use my iPad 5 days a week for work. I use it a fair bit around the house. I do my personal spreadsheets on it. I do my email on it. I do all my corporate stuff on it. So I think it'll be interesting just to see our two views of the world, whereas you basically don't use your iPad and you're a Mac guy and an Android phone person now. So your world is very different to mine. Oh, the iPhone is being demonstrated. Are we going to need to do a catch-up on your phone status maybe next week?
We'll do that next week. Okay, so how about this? if I run through my notes of the event and you pitch in when I've missed something or got something else to say, yeah?
Yeah, apologies. I was putting a face because I just elbowed my big TV behind me.
Could have been expensive. Right, so
thankfully it's still standing.
3 p.m. UK time today, Apple held an event. The artwork was very...
I think I was just going to say 3 p.m, cracking time for an event. Not 6 p.m. when I'm trying to go home from work. 3 p.m, I'm sat at my desk. I can listen to it while I'm working. It was brilliant. Perfect time for me.
It's not bad for us UK folks. It was actually, reasonable. Certainly better than the midnight one that they did a couple of times ago.
That was the Halloween event. I think that was the last, I say event, pre-recorded. I think they did back in October because I was on holiday and I missed it.
Yeah, I reported that one myself. Anyway, they had a 3 p.m. event in the UK. It was largely focused on iPads. They came out of the gate, and I got to say, the first thing they talked about the Apple Vision Pro, which all the sort of subtitles and things in that were, this is a product in our lineup. They really didn't go into it in any detail at all. So I'm not going to spend any time on it either. The Apple Vision Pro remains a product in their lineup.
Which is a line about when they hadn't updated the Mac Mini for donkey's years. The only thing I'd say on that is I had it half expected them to go, we're now selling the Vision Pro in other territories, or we will be on X date, but they didn't say that. The one bit you missed, though, before they even spoke on the Vision Pro, was they said this is the biggest day for the iPad since the introduction of the iPad. Which, when you say that, kind of tees yourself up for disappointment.
It does a bit. There's one element of the iPad line they didn't touch today, but let's come to that in a minute. So they talked about the MacBook Air. To me, it felt like they were really sort of pointing at the M3 chips at this point because obviously something else was coming.
The MacBook Air apparently is the best-selling 13 and 15-inch laptop.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
It means they shifted a lot of them.
It does, but also PC laptops come in all sizes, don't they? There are 11s, there are 12s, there are 17s, there are 19s, there's 21s. You can, the world is your oyster when it comes to PC laptops.
Can you Macs, really get a 21-inch?
Hell yeah.
That's
Gaming laptop.
That's not a laptop at that point, surely.
Gaming laptops come in all sorts of sizes. But on the Apple side of the fence, we've got a 13-inch MacBook Air, we've got a 14-inch MacBook Pro, we've got a 15-inch MacBook Air, and we've got a 16-inch MacBook Pro, and that's your lot. So 13, 14, 15, 16. So saying you ship them more 13 inches than anyone else, it might be a slightly odd size. Most people want a slightly bigger laptop, and 15 inches, it is what it is. So fair enough, they said it. That was it. That was it for product updates. They didn't do sales. Didn't we do amazing in the last quarter? They moved straight on and they said, as you said a minute ago, we're going to talk about the iPad today.
And so we got straight into the iPad. And first up, as I'd expected, was you always talk about the lesser product first, because obviously if you talk about the best product first, it makes the rest of it a bit of a harder sell. So they spoke about the new iPad Air, and for some reason they did this whilst being on a train. I guess this is to emphasise people working on iPads on trains, but it was a bit odd. I did quite like the whole style of the video, though. They did a bit arty at the front, with like a sketch, an animated sketch of Apple Park, and zoomed into Tim Cook, and I thought they did something different, which was quite nice. So they spoke about the iPad Air. It now comes in two sizes. So it comes in 11-inch and 13-inch, a bit like the previous Pro. It's got the same liquid Retina screen on it. It's now got the camera on the horizontal, the long bit of the iPad, which they should have done years ago, and I don't understand why they didn't. It's got landscape speakers. It comes in 4 colours, blue and purple. And apparently 50% of iPad Pro purchasers chose the bigger size. They had that little nugget in there, which was interesting. It's going to have the M2 chip in it, which is 50% quicker than the M1 that came before it. They mentioned AI, and I think your feed was slightly ahead of mine, by the way. You can order them today, and it works with Apple Pencil, as did the others. Don't ask me which Apple Pencil it works with, because there's about 4 Apple Pencils you can now buy. They've seemed to have simplified some things, but made others very complicated. And the storage starts at twice what it used to be. It used to be 64 gigs, so it's starting at 128, which is the minimum you should get on an iOS device, would be my view. And it's about $600 for the 11 and $800 for the 13. So still a relatively large amount of money for most people. But for me in the corporate space, I'm really happy about this, because it means that people in my organisation that always ask for the Pro because it's bigger can actually have an Air now, because they just want the screen size. They don't really need the other features. So I think this is quite a good product, sat right in the middle of the lineup. So I give this a thumbs up.
Yeah. So I quite like the Air. I don't really see the point of it with the Pro, though. I feel like it's just there to make up space in the lineup. You want a cheap thing or you want the best thing, and they're just sort of pushing into the middle here a little bit. I took the liberty of going and configuring an iPad Air at the spec I'd want, so the bigger one with cellular, with enough storage in it to be useful, with a keyboard and with a pencil, and it was £1,200.
I could quite believe it. You can spend money very quickly on these things.
And £1,200 is £300 more than on a MacBook Air.
Yeah.
So that feels swinging to me. When I look at the price of these keyboards at $249, I'm going to try not to be too negative. I'll say some positives in a minute. When the keyboard is $249 for this, and we know that not good for much more. And I didn't actually get from the keynote. Is that the new keyboard with the aluminium, or is it the old keyboard with the rubber?
For the Air, I don't know the answer to that question. I haven't had much time to double check. There's new keyboards out for the Pros, which we come on to, but I will go and have a quick look.
So just while Chris is doing it, I'll finish my thought, which is we know they're only really good for sort of 18 to 24 months. So if you're buying this iPad with the intention of it being, well, probably 18 months before the next update, you might need to change the keyboard sooner. If you buy a laptop, you don't need to change the keyboard sooner, now that they fixed the laptops and the Macs anyway. That wasn't true once upon a time, I guess. So that's my only sort of point of pain on this. I think it's a really good device. I think the screens are terrific on them. Those Liquid Retina, I think they're called, are lovely screens. Very bright, very responsive, good refresh rates, all that kind of stuff. If you don't need a keyboard, don't get one. For unless you're typing on it and you're using it as a consumption device, you want the best consumption device, I'd say the 11-inch iPad Air without the keyboard and just maybe get the folio case so you can prop it up would be absolutely the way to go. By all means, get the pencil as well. We'll talk about the pencil a little bit more too. But I think other changes to these are good. It's good they've got landscape speakers. It's good they've moved the camera to where it's meant to be. I don't think they're face unlock though, are they?
No, we were talking about this in my office. No, they are still Touch ID, which I guess is a differentiator, but I think that's a bit of a miss if I'm being honest.
It's a mistake. They make enough of the Face ID sensors that they could put them everywhere. I mean, what is the point at this point of limiting devices like this? So for me, to turn this into a business device and snap it into a keyboard and do all that kind of stuff, it's too expensive. But as the best media consumption device, I'd buy the $599 one and I'd be relatively happy with that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And neither of them have the micro LED screen, which is what you got on the previous Pro. But the keyboard, just to close that point out, is the old keyboard. It's not the new one. So it's a lot of money for some old tech.
Yeah. So again, solid update. It's too expensive. That's going to be my theme that runs through this a little bit. But other than that, I think there's solid hardware updates.
Yep, I think it's a good round of updates for people buying the Air. It's now. I think it's fair. It fills the middle point of the lineup. It is better overall. You've got the iPad, and why don't we just touch on the iPad briefly? They did announce at the end of the video the iPad 10th gen, so the base level iPad is now reduced in price. The one with the home button's gone away. Big tick. You've then got the iPad Air 11-inch and the iPad Air 13-inch. So the lineup is tidied itself up a little bit now, which is good.
It is good. I think that cheaper one should be a bit cheaper again, though. But moving on. Tell us about the iPad Pro.
So this is what we all came for. Well, I did. So apparently the iPad Pro is the ultimate iPad experience. And they had this crushing metaphor where you had a piano and speakers and tins of paint. And I guess it's meant to represent all the things you can do on your iPad. Like you can do everything with it. You can be really creative. And then they crushed it all down with a big crusher. And then they opened up the crusher. And inside was the brand new iPad, which I thought looked quite cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, isn't it? It just looks like an iPad. It's the thing,
No, but it was a cool intro.
It was a cool intro,
and it wasn't just an iPad floating in space, and you look at it from all different camera angles that they normally do. So I thought it was quite a cool intro to it.
Yeah, that is fair. It was quite, and it'll make a good TV advert. I'm sure that's what it's going to be. That's your little 20-second TV advert sponsored by whoever that will be on there in Apple, bringing it together. The actual device itself, we'll get to it, but it's all the usual things. It's lighter, it's thinner, smaller bezels, etc., etc. An iPad looks like an iPad at this point, doesn't it? Even getting rid of the home button, which once upon a time might have given, how will we know it's an iPad or an iPhone without the silhouette? But we're past that now. It looks like an iPad. It looks like a nice iPad.
Yeah, so it just looks like a slab of glass, I guess. They didn't really talk about the bezels getting any smaller and the screen being bigger, because sometimes they've done that. They've kept the physical size the same, but actually improved the size of the screen. So you can get this in either 11 or 13 inches. The 11 one is 5.3 mil thin, and then the 13-inch one is 5.1 millimeters. Sorry, my iPad, my scribe has just decided to lock itself. It's 5.1 millimeters thin. So apparently these are the thinnest devices they've ever made, which is impressive. I'd probably rather a little bit thicker and have a bigger battery, because the MacBooks get 20 hours now. The iPad still gets 10, which is good. It hasn't got worse, but it feels like the iPad should get a bit more. The iPad 11-inch weighs just under a pound, whereas the 13-inch weighs 1.3 pounds. I'm rounding up here.
Hang on, we're mixing metric and imperial here as well. That's, we've gone from millimeters of thinness. Is that because it sounds thinner than inches? What's the deal?
Okay, so I'll go to grams then. So the iPad Pro 11-inch weighs 444 grams, non-cellular. Cellular adds 2 grams, and the 13-inch one weighs 580 grams. So it just gives you an idea. What is interesting just to note is they are both eSIM only. There's no physical SIM card tray. And I'm not surprised by this. The world's going that way. And I guess they're just trying to accelerate it. Not good for you if you bought a SIM card, I guess, from your provider that doesn't do eSIMs. But hopefully my corporate SIM card will convert to an eSIM, because I don't think my M1 iPad Pro has got an eSIM capability. So when I set this new one up, I need to port my SIM card over to eSIM. So I'll report back on how that works.
I think your iPad Pro does have an eSIM capability.
I don't know.
Pretty sure it does. If you go into it and you don't have a SIM card in it, it will offer to set one up for you. It gives you some odd options. Just as an interesting aside, my Android phone offered to change my SIM card to be an eSIM for me.
Ooh.
Which I didn't agree because I wanted to put it back on my iPhone at some point. But I thought, that's interesting. How can it do that?
Yeah, I have done it on my iPhone and I quite like it, because it's one less thing for me to lose or break. But it seems okay. I did it with my sons. So the eSIM stuff does seem quite cool. Hopefully it's long enough in the tooth. So let's get back to it then. So you can get these devices in silver or space black, which is all right, but I'm kind of still hoping for a nice blue one day, maybe.
Grey and greyer.
But what did look cool is they've now got OLED screens, which was widely broadcast beforehand. And they've called it tandem OLED. So this is 2 OLED screens together to get all the brightness, and I guess it sounds really good. Like, it generally does sound good. It looked good in the video, and they've called it Ultra Retina XDR display, which again sounds good. Assuming this will come to our phones at some point, I don't know. What is nice though is obviously it's a lot thinner and lighter than the previous micro LED that was in my iPad, because my iPad was big and heavy. So I think that looks good. It's got all the usual stuff of wide color, true tone, all the things we expect now. One thing they have added though is you can have nano texture if you buy the terabyte or 2 terabyte option. I don't know why you need to spend more on the storage to get the nano texture, but nano texture only comes in at about £100 difference, so it's not too overpriced. I think personally I wouldn't go for it because I don't like the way it looks. I've tried it out in the shop on Macs, and for me it just looked a little mottly. But I don't work outside a huge amount, so it's probably not of benefit to me. They've kept with the 1 or 2 terabyte storage options. If you go for those, you get 16 gigabytes of RAM instead of 8, which you get in the others, which if you're really using it for multitasking, I think is worth it. I thought the 16 gig of RAM may have gone up with this version with the M4 chip. It may have gone up slightly, but it hasn't. They've maintained it at 16 gig. But the screen looks fantastic. Just to round that out, it does 1000 nits brightness and 1600 at peak brightness, which it sounds like it would burn my eyeballs. And then let's move on to the chip then. So they did announce the M4 chip today, which you were surprised at, I think. I thought it was coming because there hadn't been any leaks saying it wasn't coming. So to me, that kind of thought, maybe it's happening, which I'm quite happy it is, because I'm going from an M1 iPad to an M4. So I hope that's going to stand me in good stead to buy it now, keep it for a number of years, and it should be good, he says. But no matter that, they'll bring out the M5 one next year and it'll be even better. So I think it's good news. It's on the 3 nanometer process.
I'm going to hop in here. So some of the leaks before this were quite interesting, that the M3 and the M4 actually aren't all that different. The current generation of M3s are actually on a more expensive chip manufacturing process. I forget the actual, it's like M3E or A3E or something like that. So there's no benefits in sizing to these. They're still 3 nanometers. So the other one, it's a worse process, but it's cheaper. So the existing M3s aren't really all that different from the M4s. But these iPads are going up from an M2 to an M4, so they're seeing all the benefits that you got with the M3. But don't panic, the M3 in effectively your iPhone and your MacBook Pro and your MacBook Airs is just as good as these M4s that are in these iPads.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think because it is such a leap. So they reckon the M4 is 50% quicker than the M2, but obviously it's not going to be that much quicker than the M3. It's got a 10-core CPU, a 10-core GPU. That's if you get the 1 terabyte and above version. It reckons they've got 4 times the performance of the GPU over the M2, so it does feel like it's a meaningful update over the M2. And for me, coming from an M1, it's a huge update, I think. And they've also commented that there's 20% better thermals on it than the M2. Again, I do find mine overheats quite a lot, so hopefully this will all help. But it does sound like these M4 chips are pretty good for this device. An iPad shouldn't need an M4, but I guess they're hopefully going to push the boundaries with the AI piece. Maybe some of the OS, he says. I don't know.
Maybe. This was the second mention of AI that they put in there, and there was all these hints dropped that we've been doing this for years. This is why we built the neural engine into the M series of chips, and all the rest of it is to do AI stuff. So they're really leaning into this now, which isn't a surprise.
Agreed, they are really going for it. I did wonder whether we were going to get a little glimpse of iOS 18, or iPadOS 18, but obviously they didn't go near it. I think they had plenty to fill out the half an hour segment. I think it felt like they timed it quite well. It didn't feel to me they had a bit that was too long. There were some bits I didn't understand, which are coming up. After that, we moved off of hardware at this point, so it's still got one port on it. It's still got pretty good cameras. Oh, the front-facing camera is on the horizontal edge as well. Still 12 megapixels. We seem to be stuck at 12 megapixels on the front. I don't know. We seem to have reached that years ago and never really moved on, which is odd given that we all do video conferencing these days. It's got LiDAR and flash on it. And what else did it have? Oh, it does this scanner ability. Somebody interrupted me at work whilst this bit was on, but my understanding was you could scan a document using the main camera on the back and then put another page in there, and it would make it look more like a proper flatbed scan. Is that the correct interpretation?
Yeah, so they're using the LiDAR and the flash to take multiple pictures of the document as you put it into account for different lighting conditions, so it would look like a flatbed scan. Cool. Yeah, if you scan a lot of documents on your iPad, then this is going to be the feature you really wanted.
Hopefully they do that with the phone, because most of us probably do take photos of receipts and documents on our phone more than holding up a big old iPad.
So I've used the scanning thing on my phone quite a lot, actually. You can scan directly into notes, and it does quite a good job of this, actually. You can scan up to, I think it's 12 pages, might be 14 pages, by just holding the phone and turning the page, and it will automatically capture the next photograph as it goes through. You don't need to do anything else, and it reframes it, gets rid of extraneous stuff out of the document. So this is software that's already there, but obviously they're taking advantage of the fact that my phone does have a LiDAR and a good flash in it, whereas iPads up till now haven't. So this is hopefully bringing a bit of sort of a quality to that. But I do wonder, I was doing it for a very specific reason. Not many people actually do sort of sequential scanning like that. They're going to do it. As you say, most people are on business or whatever. Or annoyingly, they're at a concert in front of you and they're taking a picture on their iPad of the band that's on the screen, which drives me crazy. Who takes an iPad to a concert? Watch the concert. Put your phones down. Put your iPads down. Enjoy the gig.
I'm with you. Enjoy the moment. I'm 100% there. They also went into the iPad OS having advanced features, which was interesting. They talked about reference mode, supporting screens, Core ML, various apps. It was nice they showcased a whole bunch of apps from non-Apple developers, which I think was good. And obviously, in light of the EU piece, was 100% the right messaging they should have sent. So I thought it was good. They then talked about Pro apps, where they talked a lot around Final Cut Pro 2 and Logic Pro 2, and they mentioned lots of cool stuff that I didn't really understand. Like you can use your iPad to control multiple cameras. You can now put an app on your iPhone and use it as like remote cameras, and you could bring it all together on the iPad. I'd love to know what that's like in reality, but it does feel like Apple are making a good play for that space.
It does. It does make me slightly wonder about what the background of that is, because they also highlighted you could now plug a USB-C drive that's fast enough into your iPad and record lots of video or do video editing in Final Cut Pro 2 with this as well. But does this, for example, rely on Wi-Fi 7 or something like that to have a distributed camera network? None of that was gone into for it. And they've updated Final Cut Pro on the Mac as well, which is obviously the Rolls-Royce application of where this stuff is, and it doesn't support all this stuff. So if you want to do this multicam stuff, you've got to have an iPad to do it. So obviously you can have multiple feeds imported in the Final Cut Pro, but to actually control them during a shoot to log your footage and all the rest of it, you need this. So I will admit, it was really cool. I'm not sure who it's for. You're not going to shoot sports with a variety of iPhones and iPads. You're not going to, maybe the theatre. I don't know. If you're trying to do this quite cheaply, maybe this would be one of the ways to do it. But I got to think any sort of professional setup are going to have, if you're Sky Sports or somebody like that, you've got lots of cameras and you run cables and you do this stuff where there's no chance of it glitching out. But as a concept, it looked quite cool.
I think it did look cool. It's not Wi-Fi 7, by the way, because the new iPads only have Wi-Fi 6E, which is the same as our iPhones, which there was talk bringing the M4, would that move it along to Wi-Fi 7? It's not a biggie, but obviously if you are spending several £1,000s on the device, you kind of do want it to be future-proofed. They then went into Logic Pro 2. They spoke about bass and keyboard players and third AI, mention again, Chroma Glow, stem splitter. I don't know what these words mean. Chroma Glow does sound good. It sounds like that should have been in Final Cut though, because Chroma Glow, it seems more of a visual than an audio thing, but hey, what do we know? But it looked good, and it's nice to see some pro apps, Apple investing and not just putting them out there a year ago and just letting them wither on the vine. So it's good they've invested.
My little observation from this bit was the very enthusiastic chap that got to speak about Final Cut Pro 2 and Logic Pro 2 said that it screams on iPads, and I just thought it was interesting phrasing. I mean, it screams? Does that mean it's fast? I don't know.
It makes the fans spin up and scream. Oh, wait a minute, there aren't any.
I don't want Logic Pro to scream, thank you very much.
They then spoke about the cameras, which I've already covered. And then we got into accessories, which in Apple land and iPad land is an expensive place to be. So they talked about the new Magic Keyboard, which is new. It's lighter and thinner apparently, because it should be, because the current one is very heavy. You can either have it in white, which is not a fantastic colour, or grey or /black to go with the two colours of iPad you can get. But they have added a function row, which did come on their iPad keyboard that came out, a year and a half ago, which is good. Apparently it's got an aluminium palm rest. Interesting. Sounds like it might be heavy. And it's got a bigger trackpad, which is a win, because I don't mind the trackpad, but it is quite small.
Why do you need a trackpad on a touchscreen device?
I think it's actually quite good, because the problem you're so used to using a laptop. And if you've come from a laptop to an iPad, it is just convenient. I'll be honest, I probably use my iPad touching the screen, the trackpad, the keyboard, but you do need one if you're plugging it into an external screen that isn't touchable, which I've nearly done 3 times today. I was trying to touch my monitor at work, and then I was like, oh yeah, I can't do that. So I think it should have a trackpad. I think it's nice. But I do find myself more often than not just scrolling on the screen and tapping buttons, because it's super convenient. I see it, I can tap it, I've got to find the point to it and move to it.
Steve would have said they failed with this, but Apple made the best trackpads in the market, so yeah, fair enough. I mean, I've got a Magic Trackpad here on my desk, so it is what it is.
Snap. I also think, to be fair to them on iPadOS, I think they did a really good job of putting mouse support in there. It came out in the COVID year of 2020. And it was a complete surprise. It came out before WWDC in a point update, and the cursor support I think is fantastic, because they didn't just do what the Mac did. They did, I think, a good hybrid of Mac / your finger touching the screen. And I think, to be fair to them, it's an amazing triumph. And it would be nice to see more of that on the iPad, of that specific engineering for the iPad, rather than trying to clone what the Mac does. Then we got into Apple Pencil territory, which I think we all knew was coming. It's going to be the Apple Pencil Pro. You can squeeze it, it's got haptic feedback, you can roll it, you can do everything with it. It supports Find My. It looks quite good, and actually we've waited 6 years for a proper new Apple Pencil, and it looks like it's come a long way. And the price wasn't as scary as I thought for this one. It's $129, which in Apple world, I was expecting this to be $200. I thought $199 this is going to top out at. So I thought that wasn't too bad. The keyboard comes in $299 for the 11-inch and $349 for the 13-inch, which is too much for me by about $100 each. I think it's a lot of money for what it is. The 11-inch iPad comes in at $999 starting prices, all in dollars, and then $1299 for the 13-inch, which is a high starting point. It is a great device, but that's a lot of money. And then you can get it up to 2 terabytes. Most people, if you're really going to use it, you should probably go for the 1 terabyte, because then you get the extra RAM, you get an extra GPU core, CPU core. It's just that slight bit better. And obviously, if you want the nano texture, you need the 1 terabyte as well.
Yeah, I've thought of this. The 2 terabyte size, is that new, or did they offer that before?
I don't believe that's new. They have offered that before.
Okay. So these are amazing devices for the hardware that's in them. And I'll always maintain iPads are at the cutting edge. Having M1 chips in them, large amounts of storage, very well made, great speakers, amazing screens, and the OLED is an absolute win for this as far as I'm concerned. The accessories and things are great. They're too expensive. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But, the pencil looked quite cool. I can't draw worth a thing. I found my notes with pencils was a bit rubbish as well when I'm using it. So I would never bother with a pencil again. I think it's a waste of time as far as I'm concerned. The keyboard, when I'm trying to use an iPad as a business tool or a note-taking tool, is far more useful to me than the pencil, frankly. I can't even read my own handwriting, so it's, what's the point as far as I'm concerned. But if you are arty, the demo they showed for the Pencil Pro looked really, really cool. And the whole roll thing, this seems like, you watch Apple demonstrate these things, you think, why wasn't that in the first version? Didn't it not do that already? So all that stuff was quite cool. The prices, though. So, as you say, the pounds and dollars values for these are the same. So it's $999, it's £999. It's just a straight one-for-one conversion, not accounting for exchange rates or anything. So that's fine. It's been the same with Macs as well. $999 sounds good, and then you go and you start configuring it. And as you said, there's no point in considering anything less than the 512 for this. So you click on that, and the price goes up. And then you want cellular, and the price goes up. And you decide that, okay, yeah, I will have one of these new keyboards, because how else am I going to type on the thing? And the price goes up. And very quickly, I was at £1,800 for the smaller iPad with just a few bits and pieces on it. And I was being slightly conservative with the things I was picking there. £1,800 is not far away from a MacBook Pro. It's very close to a Mac Studio. It would get you a MacBook Air and, a half decent 4K monitor to attach it to. That's quite a lot of money.
It is quite a lot of money, and probably explains why they're not sold out yet. Because you can still go and order one now and get a day one delivery. Yeah, I went through, obviously, I was expecting there were going to be money, and I spec'd out an M2 one a couple of days ago just to see, well, roughly what money am I in for? But I think if I wasn't using it 5 days a week all the time, I would be in a different place with it. I would probably just get the small base entry one if I was just using it for consumption and watching videos and things, because I do a lot of that, and I do appreciate a nice screen, but because I use it all the time, I do want at least the terabyte one, because you get more RAM, which you do notice if you're using lots of apps. I certainly noticed it before my M1 iPad. So I have actually ordered one, and it was uncomfortable how much money I've spent, but I think I've just resigned myself to the fact I will get the use out of it. But yeah, it costs a lot of money. So I went for the 11-inch one, and I ummed and ahed around the size a lot, because I just find my 13-inch one, when I take it off to hold in my hands and read the newspaper, just too big. And I think there was an article a long time ago about Steve Jobs and Johnny Ive saying they tried lots of different sizes for the first iPad, and they just found that sort of 10-inch-ish size screen to be the optimal if you want to actually hold it in your hand. So I've gone for the 11-inch one with the M4. Obviously, I might have gone for 2 terabytes, which was expensive, but I have run out of space on my 1 terabyte model, because I do download a lot of films to it and a lot of photos, but it's my main computer for me. So I've gone for it in the view that I'm probably not going to change it for a while. And I have gone cellular as well, because I do have a SIM card in it and I want to keep that going. So it was some money. I didn't order a keyboard because I largely use it docked. And my main reason for buying the 13-inch iPad previously was it used to mirror the screen, and the resolution it did on the iPad was the screen resolution you got when you mirrored it. Whereas now you can get extended display, it doesn't matter. I have a smaller screen. But I didn't go for a keyboard because, like I say, when I'm in the office mode, I have it docked. I can dock it in my shed, I can dock it in my house, and I can dock it in my office. And nearly every office I go to has USB-C docks, so I can easily dock it when I'm visiting. So I've left the keyboard off for now. I may pick one up if they do it on a sale on Amazon. Occasionally you can pick them up with £50 off. But I just ordered a smart cover for it because obviously I want to lob it in my bag, and I did order a pencil. So that's what I went for. Do you want to know what colour I went for? Any guesses?
Of course I do.
I went for space black in the end. I ummed and I ahed, and I thought actually I just fancy a change because I've had a silver one for the last 3 iPads, so I just fancied something different. Interestingly, in the box, you only get a USB to USB-C cable. You do not get a charging plug.
These probably take a bit of charging as well, I would have thought. You want a fast charger for these.
Which I've got lots of plugs, so it's fine, but it's just like for a £2,000 thing, you're not going to give me a 3-pin plug, which, yeah. I get the whole e-waste piece, but it seemed a bit nickel and dimey.
So my MacBook Pro comes with a lovely plug with a very fast 85-watt charger, I think.
Yeah. I've got one, because I also have a MacBook Pro, but frustrating.
And just on that, you ordered a 2TB one. My MacBook Pro is 512 gig this time around. I had a 1TB last time on my M1. And other than Final Cut Pro being stupid and sort of consuming all the disk space it takes up, it's sitting on 300 gig free, and I don't really think I'm going to fill it up much more than that. So do you really need 2 terabytes?
I probably don't need 2 terabytes. I could probably easily get away with 1 terabyte. I would go for 1 terabyte because you get the extra RAM and the cores. So the 1 terabyte makes sense, and that's why there's such a jump up in price. So I probably don't need the 2 terabytes, but I kind of just wanted to go for it because I thought it'd be nice to have my videos. I download a lot of movies to it, and it'd be nice to have all my photos on it. And I thought, why not? I use it all the time. I love this thing.
So just to throw out there, if you go and you buy the cheapest possible iPad, so the iPad, I put a colour on it. I put 256 gigs of RAM because that's the SSD, effectively. That's the most you can have in there. And I went cellular. And that's 650 quid. And again, considering that's really designed just for sitting there and watching the odd movie and writing the odd email, that actually seems quite expensive. You know, for 200 quid and finding an educational discount, you're on a MacBook Air. So I feel very down on the iPad, but I think I feel almost betrayed by the iPad. This is my little bit of venom coming out now, and then I'll go back to being happy again. That it's just such a wonderful piece of hardware, and particularly now with the M4 in it, and you look at all the storage, 16 gigs of RAM, again, that's more than the base spec Mac that you're going to get. It's an awful lot of money, and then it's constrained by iPadOS. And all I want is for them, when you turn it on, to go, or you reboot it, load this as a Mac, and there is the cellular Mac of my dreams, really, where I have got a SIM card slot built into it. It's a good enough screen. I could dock it to 3 or 4 other things, because we know the M4 can do that, because the M3 can. And you've got an amazing portable thing that you can then reboot and bang, you're back into iPad, and I can go back to just, scrolling around the web with my fingers or using a pencil if I want to. And it feels like Apple will lose sales, because this, at, let's face it, 1,800 quid to get something half decent, not half decent, but really good, it's so limited by the software. And I know you do amazing things. I know Viticci does amazing things and is able to do all sorts of stuff, get their job done. And maybe I'm too down on it for that, because let's face it, at the end of the day, it's the right tool for the job for so many people. But I hit the bump so fast for the things I want to do. I want to run a code editor. I want to run a bit of Python. I want to, my terminal to SSH in a machine, and none of those things are there. And I'm immediately hitting those stops. So, of course, it's very dependent on your job. And the right tool for my job is a Mac. But I can see the potential of this thing. And I think that's why I feel, and I use the word deliberately, betrayed by it, is that it could be so much more. And it must be particularly painful for you to know that exact thing, that this is a really capable device. And even you, using it to its max, see the sort of limitations of what it is you're doing. So it's a bit galling in a way to produce this beautiful work of art technology and then hold it back like that. You've got one hand tied behind your back, even spending all that money.
I don't disagree with you at all. I just can't use one for work. We don't allow them. That policy is not going to change anytime soon. And I love using my iPad. I don't want to use Windows. So for me, it's a cost. But I do use it. I use it 5 days a week. It's my only real computer I use at work. I podcast with you on my Mac Mini. I probably barely use my MacBook Pro, really. I dabble with it every now and again. So for me, I know, whilst it's a lot of money, I will get lots of use out of it. I'm not worried about the amount of use it will get. So therefore, I'm calm on the money side, if that makes sense, because I know I will get the usage out of it. What I didn't want to do was buy one and then regret not spending a little bit more because I didn't get the right amount of storage, which is what the problem I've had with my children. And my son's going to be very happy because he's going to get a 1 terabyte M1 iPad and he can put all his games on it and play with it. So that's why I've gone for it, because I know I'll get the use out of it. But it's an eye-watering amount of money. But I will be very happy with it.
So last thought on iPads. So broadly, I'm positive. I'm really happy for you, Chris, that you got the thing you wanted. I really genuinely am. I know how much you use it. I know your corporate policy is what it is. And that, this should enable you to be quicker, faster, more efficient. For the job that you do day in and day out. And genuinely, if you're in the position where you've been waiting for this iPad, I think it's the iPad of your dreams to have that, better speakers, better connectivity, more storage, faster, better memory, to be able to run the apps you run day in, day out more efficiently. Awesome. So there you go. That's positive Rod. He's back and a bit more positive than negative Rod who was here a minute ago. Where's the Mini? The Mini is a product in the lineup, isn't it?
Yeah, and I did about getting the bigger one, slightly less storage, and then get a Mini as well at some point, because I want a small one that I can hold. And that's just, I thought, no, I just want one iPad I've had 2 iPads before, and I just don't keep them looked after. I'm surprised they haven't done anything on the Mini, even dropped the price, because it's been around a little while. The Mini is fantastic, and they've made it a niche because it doesn't come with a keyboard. It's a much smaller screen, but it does need a refresh. So it's a shame they didn't do it. Or do anything with it, really. It just seems a bit odd, that one. But I'm sure it's still going, but Apple need to get consistent with their updates. I think that's the disappointing thing. They should just come out and say, we're going to update the iPads every 2 years. Done. Maybe we do the consumer one year and the Pro one the next year, and the Pro one will always be a bit ahead kind of thing, but they haven't even done that, so it's very bizarre.
I guess the Mini might be suffering the same problem as the iPhone Mini, that nobody buys them. A couple of kids. They're very expensive for kids. Again, I've just gone to configure one. A Mini with
Most
cellular.
People should just buy the regular iPad.
Yeah, but it's £100 more than the regular iPad for the same sort of spec I put in. So,
Yeah, no, most people should just get the regular one. Anyway, so that's what I bought, and I'll feedback probably 2 weeks' time because it comes next Wednesday.
Very nice indeed. Any other final thoughts on the iPad event?
The only thing I put in there was a link to Studio Neat, because I do have a Canopy, which allows you to take a traditional Apple keyboard and put it in a travel pouch, and then you can just wedge your iPad on it. So I've put a link to that in there because I thought actually I might just try that with it because I haven't ordered the keyboard that comes with it, and see how I get on. But I obviously can always pick up a keyboard if I need to.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I thought so, and it's me saving a few quid for a change. Very nice keyboard. So that's it. I think that's the end of the show. But I'm happy. I think we got what we expected. Apple charged lots of money for some new iPads, which look blisteringly quick. And they've done the Airs, so I think we got what we expected. I don't think they dropped any bombshells per se, or anything that was like, wow, I can't believe they've done that. So yeah, happy with all that.
And they talked about AI only 3 times. I think they were holding themselves back.
They're clearly just lining up the hype for WWDC, and hopefully they can deliver on it.
I'm excited for WWDC now, though.
Aren't we all? I can't wait. I love WWDC, so it should be a good week.
Good. Moving on very quick, because we're going to hit an hour and a half if we're not careful. App of the week this week from me is called FSUAE. This is a open source Amiga emulator. It stands for Ubiquitous Amiga Emulator. I've been doing a little bit of this over the weekend, just because I was getting so frustrated with Docker containers. I wanted to do something fun for a change. And this is terrific. I picked up the Clone 2 Amiga ROMs. I think it was £11.50 or something, which is a Windows program that actually allows you to make use of the Kickstart ROMs and all the things you need to do to properly emulate an Amiga. I plugged in a PS4 controller, and I've been living my best life playing some old school Lemmings and Defender of the Crown on my Mac, emulated perfectly. It's just a fantastic thing. So if it's open source, so be you Windows, Linux, or a Mac user, you can download UAE, you can emulate your Amiga. There's a couple of little tutorials on how to do it, but it's relatively straightforward. You click a button to import the ROMs that I bought for Clone 2, and you can have a lovely time, and you can play the games from the past if you're into it. So that's my little fun thing of the week, is FSUAE.
I love a bit of retro gaming, and I love they've got Lemmings in the screen grab on the link. So yeah, it looks good.
Yep, great. Thing of the week.
Thing of the week for me is just briefly, I did a LAN party with my children. It was wireless, I had a Steam Deck, I had my children on laptops, and we played the remastered version of Command and Conquer, and my children loved it, and I've struggled to get my 10-year-old off the thing since we started playing on it. So it was really cool, and you know what? It was a piece of cake networking in this day and age. Fair play to the people that redid Command and Conquer, remaster, made the LAN work, and everything just worked. And you know what? It's a great game for them at their age to try out, because there's not too many mechanics to it. You build some tanks and you go and shoot the opponent. You haven't got to worry about mining different materials and different tactics. It's just a very simple game, and it's great. The three of us played it quite happily, and because we had 3 portable devices, we could go anywhere. I did plug the Steam Deck into a monitor and a keyboard and my mouse. I didn't actually just play on the Steam Deck because I think that would have been a handicap too far. But fantastic.
As a touchscreen in the Steam Deck, you could have at a push done it.
At a push, I could have done it, but it was nice to, like I said, I've got a USB-C dock in the house, which I use for my iPad, as we discussed, so it's nice to do all of that. But what a great experience with your kids, and it's a game I loved as a kid, and it's nice to share it with mine. I'm glad they quite enjoy playing it.
Yeah, that sounds fun, and I will just give a little shout out to OpenRA, which is an open source version of Command & Conquer that does come with a networking thing as well, and you can play with your friends, up to 8 of you across the world. You don't need to be in the same room, and you can have a similar experience, and it'll cost you nothing, but that sounds fun.
On, I think, Steam or EA, it cost me £6 to buy another copy of it, which you don't need to bother trying to, cheat the system or get a freebie for £6. So I set up another account so we could have 3 different accounts playing it. I thought that was well worth it.
This isn't cheating the system, it's people who want to keep the dream alive for the Red Alert brand.
That is true, but you don't get the remastered icons. The new graphics look amazing. Would definitely recommend it if you like Red Alert.
Fair enough. Good recommendation. I think we can call that a very long show, Chris.
Yeah, apologies. I love my iPads. If anybody wants to get in contact with us, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. I'm at _CJP at mastodon.social, or you can watch us on YouTube at wakefromsleep.com and just click on the YouTube link. Alternatively, drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.